My name's Javaad Alipoor and I'm Artistic Director of the Javaad Alipoor Company. I'm a mixed race artist who grew up in a white working class part of Bradford in Yorkshire. Through lockdown I've been doing a number of different projects, and one of them was commissioned by Grand Junction Art Centre and Theatre, which is in a neighbourhood of London called Paddington. Around that area there live some of the most deprived and actually most diverse communities in England. Over the past few years, more and more people of Islamic Muslim heritage have moved to that neighbourhood, and so I was commissioned to develop a bit of work in lockdown, working with those communities and just finding something to talk about with them. So I decided to spend some time with a group of men from around that area, all Muslim, but that was the only thing that we all had in common, and I decided to tell them two stories. Been thinking a lot what the idea of a Muslim identity might mean. I was watching the comedian Dave Chappelle on Netflix the other day, and he had this wonderful line where he says, "Just because I'm a Muslim, it doesn't mean I'm very good at it." And I think what that opens up is that variety of what that experience means. I'm struck by the idea that to be a Muslim is to have something extra, that the mainstream media think of being a Muslim as something that limits what it's possible for you to do, but for me it's something that opens up the vistas of possibility. I think it's a kind of cosmopolitanism, and I think it's a connection to the world which I've repeatedly learned gives me a way to have patter with people from anywhere from West Africa to China. The first story I thought I'd tell the lads was sort of about English history, about a coin that's about 1400 years old, a bit less than that. It was minted roughly 200 years only after the death of the Prophet Muhammad and about 400 years before the Norman conquest of England. It was commissioned by a man who called himself Offa Rex, King Offa. In a time it wasn't called England, because certainly the people who were called the English didn't run it all. Britannic speaking, basically Welsh people, controlled the northwest and parts of what's today Yorkshire. Vikings were making inroads in the northeast, and the ancestors of today's English were a series of warring kingdoms, of which Offa was about to come out on top. So in about the year 700, King Offa becomes the first person to unite all of those tribes, and so for the first time he calls himself King of the English. And to celebrate this, he has minted a gold coin. It's sometimes called Offa's dinar or Offa's coin. In any case, what kind of coin would he have his artists and artisans copy? Well, he'd have the most fashionable coins in Europe copied. And it just so happens that at that time, the best artisans and artists were in Umayyad Moorish Spain. And so Offa's artisans make a coin for him. On one side, there's a picture of his face, King of the English, on the first ever English coin. On the back, because it's a direct copy of the Moorish dinar, it says in an Arabic script, La ilaha illallah Muhammad anna Rasulullah, which means there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. And that's in fact the Islamic declaration of faith. It's the thing which, if you say it, it kind of technically makes you a Muslim. So that's the first story. The first time there was ever an English coin minted by an English king, it said on the back, there is no God save God and Muhammad is his messenger.
Has the words inscribed onto it, La ilaha illallah. Why does not everyone know about this? Like, why is this not a thing, like common knowledge in the UK?
First I was mind blown, but secondly I was just thinking like, everyone that's like, not in my England, not in my England. It's like, well, what was your England? Because you're telling me one of the first coins had like the Shahada on it. Like what is going on?
If everyone in the UK knew about it, chances are you'd be more likely to maybe possibly change your view on Islam and kind of see the influence and power that it has in history. And the fact that I didn't know about it, and not just that I didn't know about it, many people, majority of people don't know about this coin and the symbolism that it has, which I think is mad.
The second story I told the lads comes from a very different period. With the Second World War over, the American exploitation of the Saudi oil reserves was reaching a new moment, a step change if you like. Aramco, the Arab American Oil Company, began drilling in the 1920s, and immediately, in the way it built its camps, it deployed the same racist distinction between natives and whites as the Jim Crow laws in America did, and in a different way the East India Company's settlements in India did. Into that world is born a man called Abdullah Tariqi. And Abdullah Tariqi rises to become one of Saudi Arabia's first oil ministers and becomes part of a movement that tried to nationalise the Saudi Arabian oil and actually reform the country progressively, picking fights both with the monarchy and with the Americans. Now, the point is that Tariqi becomes one of the first Saudi Arabians to ever receive a modern higher education when he's chosen to be one of the early Arabs from what they call the coolie camp, which sits next door to the white camp, and sends him to, of all places, Texas in the 1950s to go study English so he can teach other Arabs to speak English. In Texas, of course, he comes across America at the height of Jim Crow, and he falls in love with a white woman. Now, you can imagine what happens when young Abdullah Tariqi tries to go to the cinema with this white woman he's fallen in love with. He sees exactly the same racial structure at work there as he remembers from his country back home. They end up getting married and move back to Arabia, where he manages to rise up through the ranks and put together a resistance movement. He's been radicalised, let's say, by what he saw in the US, and he sees parallels between his life and that life overseas, far away. It's interesting to note at the same time, one of the early reforms that the Aramco executives agreed to do was to grant the Arabs the right to go to see films at the cinema. Now, the most popular films that are shown are cowboy and Indian films, and where one of the Aramco executives says that a spy needs to be sent to the cinema to make sure that the Arabs are identifying themselves with the cowboys and not the Indians. It's within this context that Tariqi sees his and their country being colonised. Tariqi becomes part of a movement to reform and modernise Saudi Arabia and to stop the rapacious colonial extraction of oil. This leads him into a moment, like a very dramatic moment, when these negotiations are happening. And in that moment, he's having an argument with these Americans about what the deal is, how much of the oil money they get to take, whether Arabs are allowed technical jobs, all these other kinds of things. And he loses his temper and he says to these American executives, he says, "We are the sons of those Indians who sold you Manhattan, and we will renegotiate our deal." And I said this to the lads, I told them this story, and I could feel there was this moment. And I said, I don't know what it means when I say I'm a Muslim, but I do know the kind of Muslim I want to be is the one who's the son of the Indians who sold you Manhattan and has come to renegotiate that deal. In that same way that there is a hidden history to the word Manhattan, there's underneath the history of the word England a whole series of linkages. And I think everyone in that room knew what we meant when we said there was a deal there we needed to renegotiate.
It got me thinking a lot about kind of post-war influence that Muslims had on the West. Obviously in this case it being to do with oil, but more so kind of the struggles that he faced.
His powerful statement of, we are the sons of the Indians who sold you Manhattan. There's like a sense of pride from that, but also I feel a bit shameful, man, because I don't know if we have that kind of response now. Generally, we're quite apologetic and, we hate ourselves, if that makes sense. Like a lot of us are very apologetic about our own kind, like, oh no, we're not all like that. The whole all Muslims are terrorists and stuff like that. That's a very, very vague thing there. But like, we're very, very apologetic, but we don't come with any facts or any sort of pros as to who we are. Whereas a statement like that is very, very proud, and it comes with some kind of force behind it. I don't know, maybe we're just lacking bravery.
Sometimes there's a power in repeating things, just repeating them in different contexts and planting some seeds and laying some groundwork and hoping that that story somehow comes to life, somehow catches in society. There was something in the air when we told those stories in those groups, and I think what it's about is that something that we shared together, that cut across who we individually were, that we held in common. And it was full of contradiction. It was full of multiplicity because, you know, we were from Trinidad, we were from Pakistan, we were from Syria, we were from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, you know, countries as far from each other as it's possible to be. West Africa, we had some converts, some people who don't practice but are kind of ancestrally Muslim, some straight, some gay. And there was something that gave us a sense of unity and a background of knowledge that led us to have a kind of patter and a banter and a shared reflection in two stories thousands of years apart that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
As a calligrapher, as an artist, I believe that the calligraphy itself has to impart a certain feeling. The word itself has to breathe, just like human beings breathe, just like birds breathe, just like animals breathe. I'm trying to create an ambience, a different kind of ambience. So the calligraphy isn't a word. It's not ink on paper. It's not something that's static. So in order to do this, I will often sort of practice that same word again and again and again, and in different states of being. I think it's important to note that calligraphy is more than just letters, and it's more than just words.